Um, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Amanda briefly before we move on to speaking with some of our agencies about how they're assessing their ESL learners. And then Amanda will be back to talk about assessments a little more. Amanda?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. A quick update on Diploma Sender and the HiSET scores. Last month, I had told you that Diploma Sender had suspended the import of HiSET scores from PSI. Diploma Sender is now accepting import of those. There are still some issues impacting student scores being accurately brought in, but a lot of the issues have been resolved. If you have students who are from, say, October and November who are experienced issues with scores, I believe those are still ongoing. But I did want to let everyone know that Diploma Sender is accepting scores. People will be getting their credentials if they've passed, but there are still some issues that have to be resolved. Okay, Christine, let's turn it over to the exciting presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. Okay. So today we're going to have presentations from 4 of your colleague agencies, Lancaster Lebanon, IU 13, and the Lit Council of Lancaster Lebanon, a combined presentation. Also the Literacy Center, Keystone Opportunity Center, and Catholic Charities. They're all going to be talking about different ways that you can assess your ESL learners. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to the Funky Bunch in Lancaster and Lebanon counties. Josh, Jessica, and Jenny, if you want to unmute yourselves, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you so much. So I just want to take a really quick minute to introduce ourselves. We come to you as part of a really long-lived collaborative in Lancaster and Lebanon counties. I'm Jenny Bear. I'm with the Literacy Council of Lancaster, Lebanon. Jessica?
I'm Jessica Barnhart. I am with IU 13. I am the community education supervisor currently in Lebanon, and I'm happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. Josh McManus. I'm a program manager with Lancaster Lebanon IU 13.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. So we've been asked to talk about our experience using the Best Plus test with our ESL placement. And our question today is it hot or not? And before we get started telling you about our experience with it, we do want to, via chat, get an idea of what tests you're using for your ESL assessment. Do you like the test? If you're using the Best Plus, what issues are you experiencing or challenges? And if you're not using the Best Plus, what are your anticipated challenges and what's keeping you from using it? So again, if you could just quickly pop some ideas into the chat.
I'm keeping an eye on the chat for you. I don't see anything yet, but people might be typing.
Yeah, it always works better if you open chat. I got all panicky because I didn't see any responses.
So Mary Mingle says that Best Plus 2.0, it's okay to a point, but it's not rigorous enough to meet the needs of many of our ESL learners. Mary Anderson at IU5 says they use CASAS like Life and Work and they like it. Josh is asking, what assessments do you use for ESL placement? Erin Roman at Project of Easton says CASAS Life and Work. Barbara Davis, sorry, I don't know which org you're with, says they also use CASAS Life and Work. Laurie Cebulski, I hope I didn't mangle your name, says we use Best Plus and occasionally Best Literacy. Bill Schaefer over at Northampton, they use CASAS Life and Work. So a lot of CASAS Life and Works, it seems like we're getting here.
Yeah, for sure. So we in our combined program do not use the CASAS. We're Best Plus and TABE only. So we will talk about our experience with the Best Plus, the challenges we faced, and how we've overcome those challenges. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So our disclaimer today is that we want to first say that we recognize that no assessment is perfect. The Best Plus, of course, assesses listening and speaking skills for our students. So that's only one aspect of ESL learning. So we'll talk about how we've addressed some of those issues as we've faced challenges and worked through them. So next slide, and I think on to Jessica.
Yes. Hi. So as Jenny mentioned, we have faced some challenges using the Best Plus, and we know that those of you that are using it or have used it in the past, you probably faced similar challenges. So we wanted to talk about those challenges and how we kind of came at them to try to work through them. Next slide, please. So the first challenge, of course, was COVID-19. It was a pandemic. And we had to very quickly change everything to remote learning and remote testing and all of that. And we had been using Best Literacy up until that point, almost exclusively. And unfortunately, Best Literacy can't be taken remotely. So we had to find an assessment we could give via Zoom. Next slide, please. So we looked for something that we could do remote proctoring with. Best Plus does offer that option. Students can log into a Zoom and take the Best Plus assessment in a remote fashion. So that was kind of how we countered that challenge and why we ultimately switched to Best Plus during the pandemic and now moving forward. Next slide. So another challenge is it's only 2 domains. It's speaking and listening. And we know that that is a challenge that many people, question when talking about the Best Plus. It's only addressing speaking and listening. How are we getting the full picture? How are we placing students appropriately based on just 2 domains instead of 4? Next slide. So the way that we kind of face this is we understand that the Best Plus is only part of a larger picture of the students' skills and abilities. So we actually created an informal writing assessment that students complete during orientation. And then our staff scores it using a rubric. And then that information is used in conjunction with the Best Plus to help us place students appropriately. So we're incorporating those other domains as well. And then in doing this, it provided a jump start for us to start aligning our curriculum across levels. We had started doing that, but this really was the push forward to look at all 4 domains and make sure that we are considering students' growth and knowledge in all 4 when we're looking at transitioning and looking at moving them to the next level. So we look at so every student is doing writing in their classes as well as speaking and listening. So we can look at their writing assignments in conjunction with the Best Plus post-test to determine, are we ready to move to the next class? Next slide, please. And then this one, we kind of just encountered this recently. It had been there previously, but it just kind of came to light just in the last few months. Everyone takes the initial training for Best Plus, but not everybody scores the same way. You may have some people that score very differently than the person next to them because of their experiences, their past, and because the best plus is slightly subjective. So we noticed there were some discrepancies when students were being tested by different people. So we wanted to address that, and we are still addressing it. So next slide, please. The way that we have started addressing it is we created a space and a meeting where we pulled all of our test administrators together and had a conversation. We practiced scoring based on some videos of student responses. We practiced, or we talked then about the differences. Why did this person give it a 1 and this person give it a 2? And just created kind of a safe environment for people to talk through their thought process. And it was very eye-opening and very enlightening because we were able to see kind of what people were thinking, their train of thought. And we're looking forward to continuing this conversation through different meetings. And hopefully through all of that and through the continued dialogue, we're hoping to see more consistent scoring among our staff. So that is how we are still currently working on this challenge that we are finding. Next slide, and then we'll turn it to Josh.
Thanks, Jessica. So in summary, we found in our collaborative that Best Plus works well for our combined programs. We know that standardized tests such as the Best Plus give vital information about our learners' language acquisition. And we also understand that a standardized test cannot be the sole source of data that we use to inform our placement and transition decisions. As a result, we've invested heavily in our teachers and our students by developing curricula with specific exit skills, which are aligned to the ELPS and CCRS, that guide both instruction and placement decisions. And we've developed writing and reading assessments to ensure that we're empowering our learners by providing instruction in all of the 4 language domains. Assessing our learners' skills and delivering appropriate instruction to elevate those skills is a constant endeavor in continuous improvement. And we continue to have challenges, but we found some success by using the Best Plus in conjunction with some other assessments so that we can get a really clear picture about where our students are and where they need to go to reach their goals. Next slide. And here's our contact information. We'd love to speak with you if you have questions, ideas, and we love to learn. So it's really great reading the chat and seeing what assessments other programs are using across the state, and really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Christine, you're muted. Hello?
I'm sorry, I was muted and I was speaking. I was wondering if Mary Mingle was asking, do the staff find the refresher helpful for the recalibration?
Jessica, do you want to take that question?
Sure, I actually just responded in the chat.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. I said, yeah, staff does find it helpful to recalibrate to the rubric, but it doesn't necessarily help us calibrate as a program among our program staff. But the refresher is very important because it does help reinforce, and practice makes permanent. So as we continue to practice correctly, that's helpful. So that's really what that refresher the benefit of that refresher is continued practice with the official rubric, which is what we use when we do our staff calibration as well. Just our staff calibration lets us talk through it a little bit more as a program.
That's great. Thank you, Jessica. And I should let you know, Mary Mingle, that it's required to take to take the refresher. So was that a trick question? I don't know. All right. Well, thank you very much to the Funky Bunch. We appreciate your presentation. And now we're going to move on to our next agency. So Sue Klauser, if you want to unmute yourself and start telling us about how you use the listening assessment.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan Klauser, and I am from Keystone Opportunity Center. So we are northwest of Philadelphia, Montgomery County. And we have been using a listening assessment for actually 2 assessments, just like the previous agency. You can't have a perfect assessment. So we decided to use the CASAS because we could address 2 out of the 4 skills, which is listening and reading. So if you could advance the slide, please. Okay, I just listed all the CASAS Life and Work series there. I'm sure that for those of you who use it, you're familiar with these forms. I just wanted to point out the 81, some people call that the RX at our agency. We call it the AX because it's a step above the A test. And we incorporated that, that extra test because we were finding that our beginners, it was a big jump from an A to a B test. So many, many years ago, I think that test came out, we incorporated it into our assessment. Then we have the listening forms there as well. We administer both reading and listening to our students who attend our large group in-person registrations. We have a very large ESL population and have been providing ESL for over 3 decades. I think 4, if you predate my experience or my time with Keystone. And you know, since COVID, of course, we've also incorporated remote registration, so remote intake, orientation, and assessment. We have a lot of students from the eastern part, Montgomery County, who do enjoy our online classes. And so we will administer either reading or listening or both, depending on the focus of their goals. Next slide, please. I decided to list pros and cons of administering both assessments. If there were agencies out there who were considering CASAS and they weren't really sure if they were going to go with CASAS or if they were going to go with BEST. When I first started with Keystone, they were actually called AVOC then. We were actually using a form of BEST. I don't know whatever form was being used in, I'm dating myself, but in the 1990s. And then we transitioned to CASAS. So what I like about CASAS and what we like as an agency is that by administering both assessments, it better measures the student skill gap. So we can get a really good handle through the CASAS reports on reading and also listening skills. We feel that by administering both of the assessments, we can have more alignment with student goals. An example of that might be if someone wants to improve their conversation skills, while we're not testing their speaking, we are testing their listening, which contributes to their conversation skills. It's also more provides more precise level placement. If we have, as we know, our students come with many different skills. So we might have those students that we call book smart, or maybe those who are more like conversation smart. They're able to speak but can't read, or vice versa. So if someone scores into an NRS level 5 on a reading test, but they're scoring into an NRS level 3 on a listening test, our team, we talk about that and we consider what the best placement would be for that student. Providing both assessments also, it gives us more data for lesson planning. Again, those reports to share with your instructors, and they can assemble those reports and consider planning for the class. It also, you know, the fact of the matter is that in order for us to keep our programs going and to continue to receive funding, we need to show NRS level gains. So when you're giving 2 tests, if you're post-testing 2 tests, you're increasing your probability of getting a level gain. And it also increases orientation time. You might not see that as a pro, but I do, because when you're increasing your orientation time, it gives the student more time to think about, is this program for me? Can I make the commitment to this program now? Or should I revisit it and maybe come back in 3 months when maybe my work schedule is more stable, or, you know, I have childcare. Of course, we provide resources to help people with that. But because ultimately we want to work on really good persistence. Next slide, please. And then I listed the cons. Again, the increased time needed for intake, orientation, and assessment, it's both a pro and a con, because you need to have all the resources in place. Our office, we do not have room for orientation and assessment and intake with large groups. So we rely on our facilities partners. And so, you know, you have to make sure you're reserving that space for your registrations. And it happens many times per year. So it's increased time needed for that. Some students say, oh, they can't come 2 or 3 times for registration. And then we have conversations about, you know, persistence in the program. We try to schedule those registrations around our what would be our AM or PM classroom time. So the students understand that, you know, at least 2 to 3 times a week is going to be required. The listening test is a little more difficult to administer in a large group setting. Our goal this year in our program is to transition, you know, more of our students from, we do use paper-based and computer-based testing, but we're trying to transition, you know, more of our students and eventually all of our students to computer-based testing. So for administering the listening test, depending on how many students you have that, you know, locate into the A, B, or C listening test, you need at least 3 rooms, if not more, CD players, which are actually very hard to come by these days, and CDs, or have some sort of, you know, setup if you need headphones to administer the test on paper. If you're doing it on computer, you need to have all those computers set up. You can deal with some tech issues, and that can be a little frustrating and even lead to more time needed for administration of those tests. Okay, next slide, please. And then I thought I would touch on, you know, as you know, the previous agency talked about, you know, we use CASAS, and CASAS is addressing the reading and listening skills. But what about the active skills? How do we address those? So when somebody comes into our orientation and our intake, orientation, and assessment, and they're a non-speaker or a non-writer, so at intake, we're going to flag that and take some notes and discuss with the team, you know, whether this person might be better suited with a one-to-one or small group tutoring placement to start. We also, if we have students in class that we have red flag, but they say, I really want to be in class, we utilize classroom aides who might sit next to them and work with them in the classroom. This is just a recommendation to any provider. consider adding a literacy level ESL class to the schedule. We did this many, many years ago because we were finding that our range of beginners was so vast that we really needed to do something about that. And having that literacy class has just been so wonderful for those true beginners. Also, of course, I'm sure everybody does this, but trying to provide a balance of listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills in every lesson, sharing resources within your, between your instructors. And also, if you're remote or in person, making sure you do breakout rooms or group work for conversation and writing practice. And if you can, we have our regular schedule of level ESL classes each and every year, but we also throw in some conversation classes to our schedule. And our students really like those. They're sort of extras that we might do in the summer when we have a reduced class schedule. So these are ways in which Keystone addresses active skills. I think that's it for my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So we did have a question in the chat. Kathy from Vita asked if you're using Chromebooks for the testing. And I think Jamie Woods from your organization answered yes, and that you also have some laptops that you use. Do we have any other questions for Sue?
Yeah,
ahead, Sue.
I don't know, that person isn't from my organization, but we use both of those. Yes.
Okay.
And then it is very interesting, scheduling the remote registrations, because that we incorporate those questions into the initial conversation. We have a hotline, and people usually come to us initially by texting us on the hotline, and we have a list of questions that we ask before we set a remote registration appointment. And one of them is, what device are you using? Because with remote, you can't use a small iPad. You need to have a laptop or a full-size tablet. So.
We have any other questions for Sue before we move on? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next presentation. Thank you very much, Sue. That was informative. And next up, we have the Literacy Center.
Okay, thank you, Christine, and good morning, everyone. My name is Judith Garger, Director of Programming at the Literacy Center in Allentown, and thank you for inviting us to talk about our agency's testing practices. You can move on, Christine, next slide. In today's presentation and the next one too, I will be focusing on the following items. Next, please. First, I would like to share my view about the importance of pre-assessing with more than one tool, which you are probably, I can see a lot of you are sharing. And I'd like to present this through a short Hungarian lesson. Then I will talk about the testing practices at the Literacy Center, both standardized and informal. And finally, I will share our agency's ongoing assessment practices and how we provide opportunities for learners to practice all 4 skills. Okay, thank you. Next. As many of you would agree with me, I'm a firm believer that testing in more than one skill area gives us a better picture of students' overall language skills. I would like to demonstrate this actually through a short Hungarian lesson. First, I will talk in Hungarian for about 30 seconds, and then I'll ask 3 comprehension questions. Okay, you can move on to the next slide, Christine. And then I will show you the script of my speech and ask the same questions. So if you're ready, and I hope no one speaks Hungarian, because we'll then not go too well then. Okay, so here we go. Jó napot kívánok! Garger Judit vagyok, 25 éve élek az USA-ban, egy kisvárosban, Whitehallban. Címem 922 Front utca. Telefonszámom 610-578-34 59, 2 fiam van, Márk és Ellen, egy angol oktatóirodában tanítok 1999 óta. Now look at the 3 comprehension questions. And would anyone like to take a guess? Are you able to answer any questions?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay, that's good because that's what I would like to present or show, that you're probably not able to answer any. Now, let's try this again. And can you move on, Christine? And by showing the script. So, jó napot kívánok, Garger Judit vagyok, 25 éve élek az USA-ban, egy kisvárosban, Whitehallban. Címem 922 Front utca. Telefonszámom 610 578 34 59, 2 fiam van, Mark és Ellen. Egy angol oktató non-profit irodában dolgozom 1999 óta. Would anyone like to take a guess again? Mióta él Judit az USA-ban? 25 éve, 23 éve, 922. Hol él Judit? Allentownban, Whitehallban, Yorkban. Mi Judit házszáma? 922 610 578 34 59 25.
So we're
All
getting
right.
some responses in the chat. It seems that people, oops, I'm sorry, I scrolled. It seems that people are thinking the answers are A, B, and C. And then
Okay.
somebody said A, B, and B.
Okay, it's clear that you've been able to guess 2 of them correctly. The third one is a tricky one because it's my house number and not phone number. If you looked at telephone sum is telephone number, house sum, which you could guess actually if you compare the two, that it's 922. But I hope you would agree with me that yes, it is clear that even with no knowledge of Hungarian at all, a written text can be a huge help, especially at a lower level for those learners whose native language uses the Roman alphabet. There are certain words, for example, numbers or cognates, that make understanding easier. So students get the right answer, even if their English is very limited. So again, here, the correct answers were A, B, and A. Now, we can move on to the next slide. And I can also show that the same, though, is not true if students come from countries in which a non-Roman alphabet is used. So if you take a look at the same text in Russian, you will probably agree with me that answering the same questions written in a non-Roman alphabet is more difficult. So students whose languages use a non-Roman alphabet will likely have higher level of listening comprehension skills than reading skills, especially at the beginning level. So where am I going with this? Next slide, please. That yes, pre-testing students in more than one skill area has its benefits, and why. Okay, next. Pre-testing learners in one skill area may give an inaccurate picture of the learner's initial functional level. Next. Because of cognates, learners might be able to score higher on the reading pretest. This is especially true for like Spanish speakers. Learners can identify these words in a written form easier than in a spoken form. Next. Learners coming from countries with a non-Roman alphabet might score very high on their reading, but their speaking and listening skills might be much higher. And last bullet point, pre-testing in all 4 skills would be ideal. We all know that this option is not available at this time through standardized testing, but at least 2 are available, and I strongly believe that the pre-testing students in 2 skill areas will give us a closer picture of learners' overall language skills. Okay, next. So we, as similar to Keystone at the Literacy Center, have been using 2 assessment tools since 2007, the CASAS standardized CASAS Life and Work Listening and Reading series. Most of the students are pre-tested in person using the paper-based format, but remote testing is also available. Next slide. Pre-assessment is part of our 2-day intake process. On the first day, students usually complete the paperwork, including goal setting, and they also attend a short orientation session, and then they take the appraisal test. When they come in on the second day, they take both pre-tests, reading and listening. They start with the listening test first, and then they get a short break and continue with the reading test. And testing with more than one tool does require preparation and planning, but it is doable. And for our students who are unable to come into our building on the second day, remote testing is an option. Next. Now, the two standardized testing methods that I presented before are great tools for testing receptive skills. However, there have been some occasions when we want to find out more about the students' initial speaking and writing skills. So at the Literacy Center, we have developed two short informal assessment tools. One is for speaking and one for writing. The first one is a simple speaking assessment using a rubric. It has a set of 9 questions and directions for the assessor. As students respond, the assessor grades their speaking performance by putting a check mark in the appropriate column. The scores are added up. There is a chart at the bottom of the page that translates the scores into appropriate proximate functional level. The second test, next slide. It's a tool that we occasionally utilize. It's a quick informal writing assessment for our low literate students. And this tool is very useful when we want to decide whether a student is a better suit for one-on-one tutoring. It's based on the list of most frequently used words in English, and it's a dictation. So the dictation starts with one syllable simple words such as go, get, need. Students have to write them down. Then it moves on to 2 more syllable words such as student, family, country. Then finally, complete sentences and usually questions. Once student completes the writing assessment, we analyze it in terms of letter formation, recognizing initial sounds, final sounds, consonant clusters, etc. And while this is very basic, it gives us a good start, especially with low literate students. And my last slide, Christine, you can move on, includes some of the ways we try to incorporate all 4 skills into ongoing post-assessment, how we provide opportunities for students to practice these skills so they can be successful. So we test students at the end of each unit. Unit tests usually include a culminating writing assignment, listening, grammar, and reading comprehension questions. Students are also asked to prepare mini presentations so that their speaking skills are also assessed. And to be successful, of course, students need to practice these skills. So we are lucky to have a great bank of activities that teachers created and they share. And we're also very thankful for our volunteers who make differentiation possible. That's all I have, and I'm open to questions if anyone has any.
So, if anybody has any questions, put them in the chat or unmute yourself. And Alice is prompting me via text to attempt to say thank you in Hungarian. So I'm going to give it a shot here.
You can do it.
Koso no szépen.
Szívesen. Good job.
Yay!
Okay. So do we have any questions for Judith at this time? Well, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next presentation. And then we'll have time for questions for anybody at the end. So, you can take some time and formulate questions that you might have. So our final presentation today is Sarah Beck from Catholic Charities right here in Harrisburg. And so Sarah, if you're there, unmute yourself and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sarah Beck with Catholic Charities. So I'm just going to jump right in because I know everybody's looking at the clock. So today we're going to talk about our intake and assessment, both our informal and formal assessments. So if you want to go to the next slide, Christine. So for us, informal assessment kind of is bundled in with intake. Throughout the enrollment process, our intake and assessment specialists are informally assessing students' skills to help inform their formal assessment decisions. We always pay attention to the students' speaking and listening skills and how they compare to their reading and writing skills. So from the time that we're making waiting list calls for our students and seeing if they're still interested in classes and want to come in, we're starting to assess their skills from that point of contact. Like, are the students able to communicate with us easily on the phone? Do we have to switch to texting for them to understand us better? Are they counting on a friend or a relative to communicate for them? And are they able to access Zoom to complete a portion of the intake? So that also kind of gives us an idea of their digital literacy skills. So that, you know, this is a lot to assess informally. So that's why we try to focus on a one-to-one or very small group process for doing our intakes. This gives us that opportunity to take a closer look at students as individuals. To kind of support us in doing that, we take a blended approach. So we find that this helps us to both save a little bit of time as we're moving forward, and it gives us a better idea of you know, having people have an option of coming in person to do portions of the intake as opposed to all remote. So for our intake forms, this is kind of how we generally split out our remote versus in person. So for the eData forms, generally, we complete those eData forms with the students remotely. The eData intake form can be difficult for most of our ESL students to interact with. So we find that, you know, making a time to do that on Zoom, and sometimes that's right when we contact them from the waiting list. If they're available right in that moment to be able to do the form, we send them a link and get started. But being able to do that remotely, where we can really, you know, help them interact with that form and those questions, which can be a little daunting to our learners, is good. It's also a great time if they have family or friends present who want to help them with that process. So you get a lot of good information during that intake about their speaking and listening skills, and some info about their reading and writing skills if you're able to ask them to spell things for you and things like that. So once this form is done, we'll schedule an in-person assessment appointment. During that appointment, the first thing that we have them do, though, is a simplified Catholic Charities intake form. So when they come in, we ask them to sit down and independently complete this simplified form for Catholic Charities. So it has, you know, just basic contact information, but you know, it's also slightly scaffolded. So the questions get a little bit more difficult as they continue. And we do ask that the students first try to interact with this on their own. And, you know, a lot of times people will bring friends or relatives to those intakes, but we try to get folks to do this part on their own. Now, obviously, you know, if students are struggling, we can intervene. And a lot of times we do have to do that at some point, but being able to see how people are moving through that form on their own, and being able to see what they're able to answer writing wise and reading wise, their comprehension on their own, is really helpful. And obviously, like, if somebody is able to get through that entire form on their own, that's also telling us something that can be really telling about what their skills are. So during that intake process, we do get a good idea of what their reading and writing skills are and what their speaking and listening skills are. So if you want to go to the next slide. So at Catholic Charities, you know, we use both CASAS, Life and Work, the reading comprehension, and we use paper-based, and we use Best Plus 2.0. So after that, you know, intake experience, we have gotten a better idea of what their skills are, so that we can kind of make a decision about which test to use. So kind of the first two considerations for us are location and transportation. You know, is the learner able to get back to us for post-testing, and the weaker skill set. These are kind of tied for first. For some of our contracts right now, we have a wider service area. So if someone is unlikely to be able to get back to us for post-testing, then we're probably immediately going to go with BEST, because we can test remotely with BEST Plus. But if distance isn't an issue, we're going to get to go with the weaker skill set that we see. So if a student can easily interact with print materials and fill in forms, but is hesitant to speak, we'll give them a BEST Plus 2.0 test. If they're chatty and eager to communicate, but struggle with filling out forms or have limited formal education, then CASAS will be our better bet. another aspect that we take into account too is the classroom makeup. So you can take into account your current populations if you have a good handle on that. And then it can also help you decide, like, would knowing the specific reading or speaking skills of this student influence your placement into that class. And sometimes it really does just come down to timing. Even though we give students a heads up about how long the process will be, and we tell them, you know, when you come in for the assessment, you know, you should schedule at least an hour and a half up to 2 hours. Sometimes, you know, students don't really plan that well ahead. So if a student really doesn't have time for a 25-minute appraisal and then up to an hour for a pre-test, then we may, you know, not be able to do the CASAS, and we may just move on to the BEST. Okay, and if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so for people who are looking for maybe some assessment prep that you can use in the classroom, I'm sure most of you who use CASAS, Life and Work, you know that there are official practice tests on the CASAS website, but we have also found the Literacy Minnesota lesson assessments to be really useful. If you're not familiar with Literacy Minnesota, they have an enormous warehouse of resources that they've created. So if you haven't checked them out, definitely check them out. And most of these resources are free. They do have books now that they sell, but they still have all of their old lesson plans and all warehoused on their website. And and so they have these really great lessons that all end with CASAS prep kind of questions that are associated with the lessons. So if you haven't seen those, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I can send you some examples, but they're just laid out just like a CASAS question, and, you know, with the ABCD, and but they're often geared towards the content of the lessons. So it kind of expands CASAS also, but gets people just used to that whole format of CASAS testing. And when it comes to BEST Plus 2.0, we do find that like dialogue practice in the classrooms is good, but also just open questions and kind of actually kind of planning in those prompts that can happen, like, you know, tell me why, or can you tell me more, or what about you? So kind of getting people used to that format is helpful. Okay, and if you can go to the next slide. So that's my contact information. You should feel free to email me. I can send you any of those resources I talked about. And or if you wanted to see like our simplified version of the intake form, feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Could you maybe drop the link to the Literacy Minnesota resources in the chat for people,
Sure.
if that's possible?
Yep.
And please, you know, unmute if you have questions for Sarah or for any of our presenters today. Now would be open question time. We did have some Hungarian chat going on in the chat. I can't read it to you because I don't know how to pronounce it, and but it looks like people really also enjoyed the exercise, and, you know, sort of reminding themselves that, you know, how hard it is for our students, how difficult some of these things can be. Did anyone have any commentary on any of the presentations, perhaps? Oh, thanks, Sarah. Sarah put the link to the Literacy Minnesota resources in the chat for all of you. All right, well, if there are no questions, I'm just going to say thank you to all 4 organizations, actually 5 that presented today, and the individuals. So thank you to, you know, Josh and Jenny and Jessica, and Judith. Oh my gosh, all the J's, and Sarah and Susan. We really appreciate your time, and the effort that you made to share with us some of your best practices regarding assessing in multiple skill areas. And now I am going to turn everything back to Amanda.
Yes, thank you everyone for those great presentations. it really is wonderful to be able to use these webinars to help our local programs share best practices with each other. So thank you to the presenters and thank you to the advisors for pulling that together. Truly appreciate it. Just in response to their presentations and the fact that all of these programs are using multiple assessments, as a reminder, you are allowed to use your grant funds to purchase multiple assessments. We don't limit you to a single assessment. We strongly encourage programs to use multiple assessments. I will say in many of the monitoring visits that we do, or the monitoring reviews that we do when we talk to students, especially ESL students, they really do indicate that they wish that they could be assessed on multiple skill sets, especially those, as Judith was mentioning, people who may be very highly literate in their native language and it's a language that uses our alphabet. They can take a reading test and score very well on it, but they express that what they really want to work on is their spoken language. And so being able to be assessed on spoken language, or at least on listening skills formally and then informally on the spoken is important. And, you know, there's our formal assessments that the ones that are approved for reporting purposes, which of course you have to use some of those. But you are also allowed to use grant funds to purchase other possible assessments that you may want to use to determine student need and track their own progress internally. That is still allowable. Obviously, you can't use them for reporting purposes because they're not on the list of approved assessments, but they're still meaningful for you and for the students. This was some clarification that I got from OCTAE. We are allowed, so I've already talked about the fact that we're allowed to report any EFL gain on any pair of assessments as a gain. But I also got clarification. For example, if you have a student where you're assessing them with the Best Plus for oral skills because that's what they want to work on, but maybe they have very advanced reading skills and you've chosen to assess them with the TABE language test. And they are placed in an EFL based on the Best Plus, but then they show a gain on the pair of tests for the language. That still counts as a gain, even though the student has an ESL entry level. I got confirmation of that from OCTAE. So we can then report that for the federal government. And as I indicated, beginning with this year, when we calculate agency performance, we'll be looking at any gain. As a reminder, the gain still has to be on a pre-post test pair of the same test, right? So you still have to have a pre-post test of, say, the Best Plus and a pre-post test of CASAS reading. They have to show a gain on one of the pairs. You can't give a Best pre-test and a CASAS post-test and show an educational gain. I did get a question about that, so just clarifying that. So that's just, you know, you're allowed to spend money, please do it. And last slide, sorry, Christine. Since this session was focused on ESL students, I wanted to share this opportunity for ESL instructors. The information about this is also going out in the new newsletter, correct, Christine?
Yes.
Okay, so there will be information coming out in the newsletter as well. There is a standards in action training. It's conducted virtually. This is a national level training that is on cultivating a language and content focus for English learners. And they are now allowing individual teachers to register for and participate in this training. And you can register for it. There are 2 upcoming sessions, one starting March 7th, one May 2nd. This would count for PD time that we require. And there have been very, very positive comments from teachers in other states on this training. So this is something that's an opportunity for ESL instructors, and it might be very meaningful for ESL instructors who are experienced and are looking for kind of higher level professional development. Christine, did you want to add anything about this?
Yes, actually. So last year they offered this only for state teams. And I gathered a team from 2 different agencies, or maybe it was 3, and we attended together as a group. They wanted a state lead to attend with the team. And so these types of trainings are usually only offered that way. So this is quite unusual that they are opening this up to individual teachers, and for you to get access directly to sort of this level of technical assistance and PD. This is Susan Pimentel's organization that will be offering this. She was one of the original writers of the College and Career Readiness Standards, and she has experts from across the country, and actually some from Pennsylvania are some of the experts that participate in this. So if your teachers have the time to do it, and if you can, figure out how to make it work, I highly recommend having them participate in this training, especially, as Amanda said, teachers who are sort of already experienced, who are looking for a little bit more of an advanced training. This would be a good option. Laura Zangari asked a question in the chat. It's 2 different sessions. So there's a session starting on March 7th and then another session starting on May 2nd. And I think it's a series. When I did it, it was a series of 5 webinars spread out over a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Sure. So, Mercedes, I'm not sure. Why don't you, contact them and see? I'm not sure. They do spend some time working on lessons. So I guess it would depend on if your IHPDS is also currently teaching. I mean, they should be doing their 2%. Is this available for volunteer classroom aides? They haven't said one way or the other. I think it's probably a little too intensive. To have volunteer classroom aides unless they were already sort of very experienced ESL instructors. Thanks, Amanda. Amanda put the link in the chat. Great. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute. Okay, I was practicing wait time there, which all of the ESL instructors in the room know about. So I guess this concludes our presentation today. I want to once again thank all of the presenters from the various agencies that agreed to put time and effort into this and to provide their contact information. So feel free to contact them if you have any questions. I am now going to stop the recording and end the webinar. So thank you for attending.